Action.
Hi, fifth graders. Today our math lesson is going to be on volume. When you're talking about the volume of something, we're adding a dimension. We're talking about filling something up. Whether you're talking about filling a box and what the volume is of a box, or you're talking about possibly how much water does your fish tank hold. All right, in a prior lesson, we've learned about area, and area is taking the length of something and multiplying it by the width. Today we're going to add in a third dimension, and that's going to be the height, taking the length times the width times the height of it and filling it up. So specifically today we're going to focus on the volume of rectangular prisms. Our vocabulary is going to be volume. When we were talking about area, we talked about formula of area. We talked about area either being length times width, or area being base times height. Today we're adding in that third dimension, and our formula is volume equals length times width times height. Today we're going to figure out how do we find the volume of a fish tank if it's 4 inches long by 4 inches wide and 6 inches tall. All right, one way is to use a model. Here's our fish tank, and it's 4 inches long by 4 inches wide by 6 inches high. So we can simply count the number of 1-inch cubes that will fill the bottom of this. All right, and there are, as you can see in the picture there are 16 in the bottom because it is a 4 by 4. And 4 times 4, as we know, is 16. The second step would be to add in the height dimension. We know that there are going to be 6 layers of cubes in this, and so we would take our 16, multiply it by 6, and get 96 cubes. Another way to do it is to use the formula, volume equals length times width times height, and then we'll substitute in those numbers. We said the length was 4, the width was the width, was 4, and the height was 6. And then we can multiply that out. 4 times 4 is 16, and then 16 times 6 would give us 96. All right, now, whenever we've been talking about area, we've always used the little 2 to make it squared. All right, when you're talking about volume, you're adding in that third dimension, and so instead of to the second power, it's going to be to the third power, which we call cubic inches. All right, so the volume of that specific fish tank was 96 cubic inches. And we could write it like that, or if we wanted to use the abbreviation, we would put it like that, cubic inches. All right, so if we wanted to find a volume of a box that's 3 inches long, 3 inches wide, and 5 inches tall, all right, like this, if this is 3 inches, all right, it is like this, and it's 3 inches by 3 inches by 5 inches, how would we do that? We would take the length and multiply it by the width. 3 times 3 is 9, and then you're going to multiply it by the height of 5. And 9 times 5, everybody, is
45.
45. All right, letter C would be the correct answer. All right, here's an example of a rectangular prism. Again, we're going to use that formula, volume equals length times width times height. All right, and so we just substitute in those numbers. All right, we could take 12 and multiply it by 8, and then multiply it by the height of 5. All right, and then when you multiply those together, I would start with what you can do mentally. 8 times 5 is 40, and then we can multiply it by 12. 12 times 4 is 48. Add the 0 on, it would be 480. We're working with meters here, so it would be meters cubed. All right, so why don't you take a second and see if you can figure out the volume of this cube. Again, you're going to use the formula, please, that volume equals length times width times height. Now, when we're doing these, all right, whether you're working on area or you're working on volume, or our next topic is going to be surface area, you are allowed to use your calculators to do that and come up with your answer. All right, so when we multiply those three dimensions together, we would get 468 cubic millimeters. All right, now one more thing I want to talk about is whether you're doing volume or area, if you get a fraction in there, you can use your calculator to turn the fraction into a decimal. All right, so for example, if you have 1/4, all right, use your calculator, all right, to turn that fraction into a decimal, and you can do it by taking the top number and dividing it by the bottom number. All right, I'll show you on the board here, for example, all right, 1/4, all right, if you have 1/4, you take the top number and divide it by the bottom number, it would be 1 and dividing it by 4. Now remember, 1 is the same as 1, and then we add a decimal after it with a 0, all right, 4 doesn't go into 1, all right, but it does go into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. When we subtract, we get 2. We can go up here and add another 0 on, bring that down, and 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20, and 20 minus 20 is 0. Once you get to 0 down at the bottom, you know you're done, and there is your equivalent decimal. So 1/4 is equivalent to 0.25. Now you can do the same thing on your calculator and simply always divide out the top number divided by the bottom number equals, and that will give you 0.25. So if you get a problem where there's a fraction in it for area or volume or surface area, turn that fraction into a decimal, and then you'll be able to divide it out or multiply it out that way with the decimal. We miss you here at school, and we hope you're all doing well.